Well, we're rolling. Good evening, my friends. Happy Tuesday, right? I know. Excuse me. Sometimes the days seem a little weird, right? You're just is today Saturday? Oh, it's Wednesday. Oh, okay. I uh I always look forward, especially in the summer. I kind of get a little wacky because I don't have a regular schedule when I work on the farm. It's it's a little more hectic. I do have like somewhat of a regular schedule, but sometimes like one day I'll work 12 hours, the next day I'll work 4, so that's a little kind of all over the place, but I always look forward to getting back to, and it always seems there's just a lot more going on in the summertime with my kids and stuff, which is cool. But excuse me, I always look forward to going back to school because then I get on a regular schedule. So, well, my friends, Jurgis was let out of jail, and he was hoodwinked, I guess we could say, by a kid. He headed out of town. Now he's headed back on his way into town. He's soaked with water. He ducked under a train, and now he's coming across a policeman, right? So a policeman gave him his direction and told him that he had to go 5 miles. He came again to the slum districts, to avenues of saloons and cheap stores with long, dingy red factory buildings, coal yards, railroad tracks, and then Jurgis lifted up his head and began to sniff the air like a startled animal, scenting the far-off odor of home. Usually I don't do that. I don't know about you guys, but I don't usually go, oh, I'm getting close to home. Maybe you do. But anyway, it was the late afternoon and he was hungry, but the dinner invitations hung out of the saloons were not for him. So he came at last to the stockyards, to the black volcanoes of smoke, the lowering cattle, and the stench. Then, seeing the crowded car, his impatience got the better of him, and he jumped aboard, hiding behind another man unnoticed by the conductor. In 10 minutes more, he had reached his street and home. He was half running as he came around the corner, and there was the house, at any rate. Then suddenly he stopped and stared. What?
I'm having trouble hearing.
There goes Siri. What was the matter with the house? Jurgis looked twice, bewildered. Then he glanced at the house next door and at the one beyond, then at the saloon on the corner. Yes, it was the right place, quite certainly. He had not made a mistake, but the house was a different color. He came a couple of steps nearer. Yes, it had been gray, and now it was yellow. The trimmings around the windows had been red. Now they were green. It was all newly painted. How strange that made him seem. Jurgis went closer, but keeping on the other side of the street. A sudden and horrible spasm of fear had come over him. His knees were shaking beneath him, and his mind was a whirl. New paint on the house, new weatherboards, where the old had begun to rot off, and the agent had got after them. New shingles over the hole in the roof too. The hole that they had for 6 months had been the bane of his soul. He, having no money to have it fixed and no time to fix it himself. The rain leaking in, the overflowing of the pots and the pans he put to catch it, and the flooding in the attic and the loosening of the plaster, and now it was fixed. The broken window pane replaced. And the curtains in the windows, new white curtains, stiff and shiny. Then suddenly the front door popped open. Jurgis stood, his chest heaving, as he struggled to catch his breath. A boy came out, a stranger to him, a big, fat, rosy-cheeked youngster, such as he had never seen in his home before. Jurgis stared at the boy, fascinated. He came down the steps whistling, kicking off the snow. He stopped at the foot and then picked some up. Then he leaned against the railing, making a snowball. Excuse me. A moment later, He looked around and he saw Jurgis, and their eyes met. It was a hostile glance, the boy evidently thinking that the other had suspicions of his snowball. When Jurgis started slowly across the street toward him, he gave a quick glance about, meditating retreat. But then he concluded to stand his ground. Jurgis took hold of the railing of the steps, for he was a little unsteady. What are you doing here? He managed. Go on, said the boy. You, Jurgis tried again. What are you doing here? Me? Answered the boy angrily. I live here. You live here, Jurgis panted. He turned white and clung more tightly to the railing. You live here? Where's my family? The boy looked surprised. Your family, he echoed, and Jurgis started toward him. This is my house, he cried. Come off, said the boy. Then suddenly the door upstairs opened and he called, Hey, Ma, there's a fellow here says he owns this house. A stout Irish woman came to the top of the step. What's that? She demanded. Jurgis turned towards her. Where is my family? He cried. I left them here. This is my home. What are you doing in my home? The woman stared at him in frightened wonder. She must have thought that she was dealing with a maniac. Jurgis looked like one. Your home, she echoed. My home, he half shrieked. I live here, I tell you. You must be mistaken. No one ever lived here. This is a new house. They told us so. What have you done with my family? Shouted Jurgis frantically. A light had begun to break upon the woman. Perhaps she had had doubts of what they had told her. I don't know where your family is, she said. I bought the house 3 days ago, and there was nobody here, and they told me it was all new. Do you really mean that you had rented it? Rented it, panted Jurgis. I bought it. I paid for it. I own it. And they, my God, can't you tell me where my family, where my people are? She made him understand at last that she knew nothing. Jurgis's brain was so confused that he could not grasp the situation. It was as if his family had been wiped out of existence. It was as if they were proving to be the dream people who never had existed at all. He was quite lost. But then suddenly he thought of grandmother Mazukieni, who lived on the next block. She would know. He turned and he started to run. Grandmother came to the door herself. She cried out when she saw Jurgis, wild-eyed and shaking. Yes, she could tell him. The family had moved. They had not been able to pay the rent, and they had been turned out into the snow, and the house had been repainted and sold again the next week. No, she had not heard how or where they were, but she could tell him that they had gone back with Aniele Jukniene, with whom they had stayed when they first came to the yards. Wouldn't Jurgis come in and rest, she said. It was certainly too bad, if only he had not gone into jail. And so Jurgis turned and staggered away. He did not go very far around the corner. He gave out completely, and he sat down on the steps of the saloon. He hid his face in his hands, and he shook all over with dry, racking sobs. Their home. They had lost it. Grief, despair, rage overwhelmed him. What was an imagination of this thing to the heartbreaking, crushing reality of it all, to the sight of people, of strange people living in his house, hanging their curtains in his windows, staring at him with hostile eyes. It was monstrous. It was unthinkable. They could not do it. It could not be true. Only think what he had suffered for that house, what miseries they had all suffered for, the price that they had paid for it. The whole long agony came back to him. Their sacrifices in the beginning, the $300 that they had scraped together, all they owned in the world, all that stood between them and starvation, and then their toil, month by month, to get together $12 and the interest as well. And now, then the taxes and the other charges and the repairs, and why not? Why? Why had they put their very souls into the payments of the house? They had paid for it with their sweat and tears. Yes, more, with their very lifeblood. Antanas had died of the struggle to earn that money. He would have been alive and strong today if if he did not have to work in Durham's dark cellars to earn his share. And Ona, too, had given her health and strength to pay for it. She was wrecked and ruined because of it. And so was who had been a big, strong man 3 years ago. Now he sat here shivering, broken, cowed, weeping like a hysterical child. Ah, they had cast all into the fight, and they had lost. They had lost. All that they had paid was gone, every cent of it, and their house was gone. They were back where they started. Excuse me. They were back where they had started from, flung out into the cold to starve and freeze. Jurgis could see all the truth now. He could see himself through the whole long course of events, the victim of ravenous vultures that had torn into his vitals and devoured him, of fiends that had racked and tortured him, mocking him, meantime jeering in his face. Ah, God, the horror of it, the monstrous, hideous, demonical wickedness of it all. He and his family, helpless women and children, struggling to live, ignorant and defenseless and forlorn as they were, and the enemies that had been lurking for them, crouching upon their trail, thirsting for their blood, the first lying circular and smooth-tongued slippery agent. That trap of the extra payments, the interest, and all the other charges that they had not the means to pay and would never have attempted to pay. And then all the tricks of the packers, their masters, the tyrants who ruled them, the shutdowns, the scarcity of the work, the irregular hours, and the cruel speeding up, the lowering of wages, the raising of prices, the mercilessness of nature about them, of heat and cold, rain and snow, the mercilessness of the city, of the country in which they lived, of its laws and customs that they did not understand. All of these things had worked together for the company that had marked them for its prey and was waiting for its chance. And now, with this last hideous injustice, its time had come, and it had turned them out bag and baggage, and taken their house and sold it again. They could not do anything. Their hands were tied. The law was against them. The whole machinery of society was their oppressor's command. If Jurgis so much had raised a hand against them, back he would go into the wild beast pen from which he had just escaped. To get up and go away was to give up, to acknowledge defeat, to leave the strange family in possession. And Jurgis might have sat shivering in the rain for hours before he could do that. Had it not been for the thought of his family, it might be that he had worse things yet to learn. And so he got to his feet and started away, walking on, wearily, half dazed. Jurgis is not doing so good. He is, his body and his mind are going. To Aniele's house and back of the yards was a good 2 miles. The distance had never seemed longer to Jurgis. When he saw the familiar dingy gray shanty, his heart was beating fast. He ran up the steps and began to hammer on the door. The old woman herself came and opened it. She had shrunk all the way up with her rheumatism since Jurgis had seen her last. Her yellow parchment face stared up at him with a little above the level of the doorknob. She gave a start when she saw him. "Is Ona here?" he cried. "Yes," was the answer. "She's here." "How?" Jurgis began, and then stopped short, clutching convulsively at the side of the door. From somewhere within the house had come a sudden cry, a wild, horrible scream of anguish, and the voice was Ona's. For a moment, Jurgis stood half paralyzed with fright. Then he bounded past the old woman and into the room. It was Aniele's kitchen, and huddled around the stove were a half dozen women, pale and frightened. One of them started to her feet as Jurgis entered. She was haggardly and frightfully thin, with one arm tied up in a bandage. He hardly realized that it was Marija. She looked first for Ona, then not seeing her, he looked first for Ona, then not seeing her, he stared at the women, expecting to speak to them. But they sat dumb, gazing back at him, panic-stricken. A second later, another piercing scream. It was from the rear of the house and upstairs. Jurgis bounded to a door of the room and flung up it. There was a ladder leading to a trap door to the garret, and he was at the foot of it when suddenly he heard a voice behind him. He saw Marija at his heels. She realized him. She seized him by the sleeve with her good hand, panting wildly. "No, Jurgis, stop." "What do you mean?" he gasped. "You must not go up," she cried. Jurgis was half crazed with bewilderment and fright. "What's the matter?" he shouted. "What is it?" Marija clung to him tightly. He could hear Ona sobbing and moaning, and he fought to get away and climb up without waiting for her to reply. "No, no," she rushed in. "Jurgis, you mustn't go up. It's the child." "The child?" he echoed. "Antanas?" Marija answered him. "The new one." Then Jurgis went limp, and caught himself on the ladder. He stared at her as if she was a ghost. "The new one? But it isn't time," he added wildly. Marija nodded. "I know," she said, "but it's come." Then again came Ona's scream, smiting him like a blow in the face, making him wince and turn white. Her voice died away into a wail, and then he heard sobbing again. "My God, let me die, let me die." And Marija hung her arms about him, crying. "Come out, come away," she said. She dragged him back to the kitchen, half carrying him, for he had gone to pieces. It was as if the pillars of his soul had fallen in. He was blasted with horror. In the room, he sank into a chair, trembling like a leaf. Marija stood holding him, and the women staring at him in dumb, frightless help. Then once again Ona cried out. He could hear it nearly as plainly here. He staggered to his feet. "How long has this been going on?" he said. "Not very long," Marija answered. And then, with a signal from Aniele, she rushed on. "You go away. Jurgis, you can't help. Go away and come back later. It's all right. It's..." "Who's with her?" Jurgis demanded. And then, seeing Marija's face, "Who's with her?" "She's all right. Elizabeta is with her." "But the doctor, someone who knows." He seized Marija by the arm, and she trembled, and her voice sank beneath a whisper. "We have no money." They frightened at the look on his face, and she exclaimed, "It's all right, Jurgis. You don't understand. Go away." As if if you only had waited. Above her protests, Jurgis heard Ona again. He was almost out of his mind. It was all new to him, raw and horrible. It had fallen upon him like a lightning stroke. When little Antanas was born, he had been at work and had known nothing about it until it was all over. And now he was not to be controlled. The frightened women were at their wits' end. One after another, they tried to reason with him, to make him understand that this was the lot of a woman. In the end, they half drove him out into the rain, where he began to pace up and down, bareheaded and frantic, because he could not hear Ona from the street. He would first go away to escape the sounds, and then come back because he could not help it. At the end of quarter of an hour, he rushed up the steps again, and for the fear that he would break down the door, they had opened it and they had let him in. There was no arguing with him. They could not tell him that all was going well. How could they know? He cried. Why, she was dying. She was being torn to pieces. Listen to her. Why, it's monstrous. It could not be allowed. There must be some help for it. Had they tried to get a doctor, they might pay him afterward. They could promise. We couldn't promise, Jurgis, protested Marija. We had no money. We have scarcely been able to keep alive. But I can work, Jurgis exclaimed. I can earn money. Yes, but we thought you were in jail. How could we know when you would return? They will not work for nothing. Marija went on to tell how she had tried to find a midwife and how they had demanded $10, $15, even $12 in cash. And I only had a quarter, she said. I have spent every cent of my money. all that I had in the bank, and I owe the doctor who has been coming to see me, and he has stopped because he thinks I don't mean to pay him. We owe Aniele for 2 weeks' rent, and she is nearly starving and is afraid of being turned out. We have been borrowing and begging to keep alive, and there is nothing more we can do. And the children, cried Jurgis. The children have not been home for 3 days. The weather has been so bad. They could not know what is happening. It came suddenly, 2 months before we expected it. Jurgis was standing by the table, and he caught himself with his hand. His head sank and his arm shook. It looked as if he was going to collapse. Then suddenly, Aniele got up and came hobbling toward him, fumbling in her shirt pocket. She drew out a dirty rag, in one corner of which she had something tied. Here, Jurgis, she said, I have some money. Palak, see? She unwrapped it and counted it, 34 cents. You go now, she said, and try to get somebody yourself, and maybe the rest can help. Give him some money, he will pay you someday back, and it will do him good to have something to think about, even if he doesn't succeed. When he comes back, maybe it will be over. So it sounds like she's given him a little bit of money, saying, go out and try to find somebody, at least, get out of our face right now and get your mind off this. Hopefully, by the time you come back, the baby will have come. So the other one turned out the contents of their pocketbooks. Most of them had only pennies and nickels, but they gave him all. Mrs. Olszewski, who lived next door and had a husband who was a skilled cattle butcher but a drinking man, gave nearly $50, enough to raise the whole sum to $1.25. Then Jurgis thrust it into his pocket, still holding it tightly in his fist, and started to run away. All right, we're already at chapter 19. We still got about 10 minutes to read. Madame Hopp Hembaum ran a sign. Swinging from a second-story window over a saloon on the avenue, at a side door was another sign, with a hand pointing up a dingy flight of stairs. Jurgis went up it, 3 at a time. Madame Hopp was frying pork and onions and had her door half open to let out the smoke. When he tried to knock upon it, it swung open the rest of the way. He gave her a glimpse, with a black bottle turned up to her lips. Then he knocked louder, and she started and put it away. She was a Dutch woman, enormously fat. When she walked, she rolled like a small boat on the ocean, and the dishes in the cupboard jostled each other. She wore a filthy blue wrapper, and her teeth were almost black. What is it? She said. What is it? And then she saw Jurgis. He had run like mad all the way and was out of breath, so he could hardly speak. His hair was flying and his eyes were wild. He looked like a man who had risen from the tomb. My wife, please come quickly. Madame Hopp set the frying pan to one side and wiped her hands on the wrapper. What do you want? What do you want me to come for a case? She inquired. Yes, gasped Jurgis. You must come back from a case, she said. I have not had time to have my dinner. Still, if it is not so bad. Yes, it is, he cried. Well then, perhaps, what will you pay? How much do you want? $25. His face fell. I can't pay that, he said. The woman was watching him narrowly. How much do you pay? Must I pay now, right away? Yes, all my customers do. I haven't had much money. Jurgis began in an agony of dread. I've been in trouble and my money is gone, but I'll pay you every cent just as soon as I can. What is your work? I have no place now. I must get one, but how much have you now? He could hardly bring himself to reply. $1.25. The woman laughed in his face. I would not put my half for $1.25, she said. It's all I've got, he pleaded. I must get someone. My wife will die. I can't help it. Madame Hopp had put back her pork and onions on the stove. She turned to him and answered, out of the steam of noise. Get me $10 cash, and you can go pay me the rest next month. I can't do it. I haven't got it. I tell you, I only have $1.25. The woman turned to her work. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. That is all you tried to cheat me. What is the reason a big man like you got only $1.25? I've been in jail, Jurgis cried. He was ready to get down upon his knees to the woman. And I had no money before. My family is almost starved. There is your friends. Doe ought to help you. They are all poor, he answered. They gave me this. I have done everything I can. Haven't you got nothing that you can sell? I have nothing, I tell you. I have nothing, he cried. Can't you borrow it then? Don't your store people trust you? Then, as he shook his head, listen to me. If you get me, you will be glad of it. I will save your wife and baby for you. If it will not seem like much to you in the end, if you lose them now, you think you will feel then. And here is a lady that knows her business. I could send you to people in this block and they would tell you. That's some pretty good Dutch that I speak there. Madame Hop was pointing her cooking fork at Jurgis persuasively, but her words were more than he could bear. He flung up his hands with a gesture of despair and turned away. It's no use, he exclaimed. But suddenly he heard the woman's voice behind him. I will make it for $5 for you. She followed behind him, arguing with him. You will be foolish not to take such an offer. You won't find anybody go out in a rainy day like this for less. Why, I have never took a case in my life so cheap as that. I couldn't pay my own room rent. Jurgis interrupted her with an oath of rage. If I hadn't got it, he shouted, how can I pay you? Damn it, I would pay you if I could. But I tell you, I haven't got it. I haven't got it. Do you hear me? I haven't got it. He turned and started away again. He was halfway down the stairs. Wait, I will go with you. Come back. He went back into the room. It is not good to think of anybody suffering, she said in a melancholy voice. I might as well go with you for nothing you've got to offer me, but I will try to help you. How far is it? 3 or 4 blocks from here. 3 or 4? Und then shall I get soaked? Gott in Himmel, I ought to be was more. $1.25. And in a day like this. But you understand now. You will pay me the rest, $25 soon, as soon as I can. Sometime this month? Yes, within a month, said Jurgis. Anything, hurry up. Where is this $1.25? Persisted Madame Hop relentlessly. Jurgis put the money on the table, and the woman counted it and stowed it away. Then she wiped her greasy hands and proceeded to get ready, complaining all the time. She was so fat it was pitiful for her to move, and she grunted and gasped at every step. She took off her wrapper without even taking the trouble to turn back to Jurgis, and put on her corsets and dress. And there was a black bonnet in which she had adjusted carefully, an umbrella which was mislaid, and a full bag of necessaries which had to be collected from here and there. The man being very, very nearly crazy of anxiety in the meantime. When they were on the street, he kept about 4 paces ahead of her, turning now and then, and he would hurry up by the look of force of his desire. But Madame Humph could only go so far as at a step, and it took all of her attention to get the needed breath for that. Man, things are getting exciting here. They came at last to the house, and the group of frightened women in the kitchen. It was not over yet, Jurgis learned. He heard Ona crying still. And meantime, Madame Hop removed her bonnet and laid out on the mantelpiece, got out her bag, first an old dress and then a saucer of goose grease, which she proceeded to rub upon her hands. The more cases this goose grease is used in, the better luck it brings to the midwife. And so she keeps it upon her kitchen mantelpiece and stowed away in a cupboard with her dirty clothes for months and sometimes even for years. Then they escorted her to the ladder, and Jurgis heard her give an exclamation of dismay. Gott in Himmel, What have you brought me to a place like this? I could not climb up the ladder. I could not get to trap door. I will not try it. I might kill myself already. What sort of place is that woman to bear a child in? Up in the garret, mit only a ladder to it. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. Jurgis stood in the doorway and listened to her scolding, half drowning out the horrible moans and screams of Ona. At last, Aniele succeeded in pacifying her, and she essayed the ascent. Then, however, she had to be stopped while the old woman cautioned her about the floor of the garret. They had no real floor. They had laid out old boards in one part to make a place for the family to live. It was all right and safe there, but the other part of the garret had only joists of the floor and the lath and plaster of the ceiling below. If one stepped on it, there would be a catastrophe, as if it was half dark up above. Perhaps one of the others had better go first with a candle. And there were more outcries and threats, until at last Jurgis had a vision of a pair of elephant legs disappearing through the trap door, and felt the house shake as Madame Hobbs started to walk. Then suddenly Aniele came to him and took him by the arm. Now, she said, you go away. Do as I tell you. You have done all that you can, and you are only in the way. Go away and stay away. But where shall I go? Jurgis asked. I don't know where, she answered. Go on the street if there is no other place, only go, and stay away all night. In the end, she and Marija pushed him out of the door and shut it behind him. It was just about sundown, and it was turning cold. The rain had changed to snow, and the slush was freezing. Jurgis shivered in his thin clothing, and he put his hands into his pockets and started away. He had not eaten since morning, and he felt weak and ill. With a sudden throb of hope, he recollected he was only a few blocks from the saloon where he had been wont to eat his dinner. They might have mercy on him, or he might meet a friend and set out for the place as fast as he could. Hello, Jack, said the saloon keeper when he entered. They called all the foreigners and unskilled men Jack in Packingtown. Where you been? Jurgis went straight to the bar. I've been in jail, he said, and I've just gotten out. I've walked home all the way, and I don't have a cent, and I've had nothing to eat since morning. I've lost my home, my wife's ill, and I'm done up. The saloon keeper gazed at him with his haggard white face and his blue trembling lips. Then he pushed a big bottle toward him. Fill her up, he said. Jurgis could hardly hold the bottle. He shook so. Don't be afraid, said the saloon keeper. Fill her up. So Jurgis drank a large glass of whiskey, then turned to the lunch counter. In obedience to the other's suggestion, he ate all he dared, stuffing it in as fast as he could, and then, after trying to speak his gratitude, he went and sat down by a big red stove in the middle of the room. It was too good to last, however. Like all things in this world, his so-clothed clothing began to steam, and the horrible stench of fertilizer to fill the room. In an hour or so, the packing houses would be closing, and the men coming in from their work. They would not come to a place that smelt of Jurgis. And so, it was Saturday night, and with a couple of hours would come a violin and a cornet. And in the rear part of the saloon, the families of the neighborhood would dance and feast upon Wienerwurst and lager. Ooh, that sounds pretty good. Wienerwurst. Until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the saloon keeper coughed once or twice. Then he remarked, Say, Jack, I'm afraid you have to quit. All right, let's call it there. So, whoopsie. So, Jurgis is back home. Uh-oh. Found the family, but the house is gone. And I'm trying to save our place here. Here we go. And things aren't so good. The baby is coming early, and he is got no money And now he owes this midwife a lot of money. And he's in the saloon. He's got some whiskey and food in him, but he stinks. So he's got to leave. But maybe things are turning around. It's kind of scary, too, I guess, that the kids are away for, have been away for 3 days. Again, this is just simply a ginger ale that I'm drinking. You guys hear that crack, and you think that something wrong is going. Well, I don't know. Drinking a beer at my age is not wrong, but doing it in front of students is probably wrong. Anywho, let's talk the news. So really today, guys, a lot of talk about reopening. A lot of talk about reopening across the country. I think we talked last night that Texas is Friday reopening. And I've been talking to people about this. In a way, I kind of think this could be good because we're going to get to see Texas open for 2 weeks, before we really open. Because it looks like the governor is looking at May 15th, and he's kind of going like, all right, New Yorkers, I'm going to start to open the valve a little bit on May 15th. And again, we talked about this a little bit last night. But they're giving a little bit more information. So in the last 24 hours, my friends, before we get into that, 335 families lost a family member to the coronavirus. However, the hospitalization rate, meaning the new people checking in, being hospitalized for the coronavirus, is still dipping down. It's under 1,000 people. To this day, though, we have 17,600 people that have died in New York State. And now they've upped this other number a little bit. One of the things that, and I've mentioned this, I think, a couple times, when, part of being a doctor, first and foremost, doctors and nurses are, whether you think about it or not, scientists. And right now that we are kind of, well, it's been happening the whole time, but more and more people, now that we're heading in this good direction, people are starting to look back. And now what they think as they're going through medical records is that they think that at least 5,200 people probably died in New York City of coronavirus as all of this was going on. But did I say New York City? I'm sorry, New York State. They've died, but they weren't identified, meaning their blood wasn't tested. They may have died of something else, but what weakened them was the coronavirus. So, and I guess that they're starting to see that this coronavirus is really starting to act differently in every person. Meaning that somebody might get it, but they don't necessarily have all the same things that are going on. And I guess some people are starting to develop some, certainly mental and psychological problems from having it. Like maybe they didn't get it physically as bad, but they're starting to have some mental things that I guess kind of deteriorate as a result of it. But here's what we're looking at. And I know you guys probably, excuse me, you probably heard that President Trump has officially said that he would like to see schools reopen. That's what he said. The governor of New Jersey announced today maybe New Jersey schools are going to reopen before the year is out. Yeah, I don't know, right? I don't know. I guess, and what I saw right before I went live is the governor of California is saying what he's considering doing is closing that, basically like, boom, we're done with school right now, but I'm going to start the school year August 1st. So it looks like around the country, like different people in different states are starting to come up with some different ideas on how to, oh my goodness, on how to kind of do things. But I don't know. I'm not too sure about any of that. I think if you shut things down right now and then you kind of said, well we're going to come back August 1st, but what if we're not really ready to come back August 1st and then you lose that 2 months, you know? Right now, people are trying. I feel like we've just kind of gotten into a stride with, now they're not calling it virtual learning, they're calling it teleeducation. So I need to be hip and call it teleeducation. Um, I guess I feel like we're just getting the groove of it. So to stop it, and that's why I kind of think, like, let's say we did go back. Let's say that, like, you know, right after Memorial Day, we heard we're going to go back for the last 3 weeks of school. Well, for 2 months, to that, by that point, it would be for over 2 months. We've been cruising with teleeducation. Now we're going to go back to regular classroom learning for 3 weeks. You know, is that really the best way to roll with it? So I don't know. I would like them to make a decision. I would really like them to make a decision soon. And my guess is, and I could be wrong, because I have been wrong, and I will admit when I'm wrong. My guess is they've already made a decision. I truly believe that the Board of Regents probably is like 98% decided on a plan of action. However, they are waiting for the politically perfect moment to drop that decision. And maybe overall that's the best thing for us. Maybe that's the best thing. But I think that when you don't know, your mind races, your mind lingers, you start thinking of all the possible things that could be happening. And that's not good, you know? I don't think that's good for us. And I think that knowing and then being able to go, crap, we're not going back. You're going to be sad for a couple days, right? I'm not going to see Mr. Martin until September, right? You're going to be sad about that. But then after a day or two, you're going to go, okay, well, I'll see him in September. Now, boom, let's get through it. Maybe I'm wrong. You could say, Mr. Martin, you're full of crap. Most people aren't going to react that way. But I think that when we get the bad news, it hits us. We take some time, we get emotional, and then we move on, right? We get through it. So I don't know. I mean, how many of you guys really want to know now? Do you really just want to know, no, we're not going back? Or do you just want to wait a couple weeks to hear, well, we're going to tell you in a couple weeks? I don't know. Well, let me hear what you guys have to say about that. Whilst you are sharing your comments, I will again, there's a little bit more talk about this phase 1 and phase 2 of reopening. So what the governor, Andrew Cuomo, is saying is this: phase 1 of reopening, the CDC, the Center for Disease Controls, has laid out some guidelines. First of all, when you really start to reopen things, your state must have been in a 14-day decline. So that's a decline in deaths, a decline in hospitalization, and things are moving down, and they're not jumping up and down. It is a 14-day straight decline. I don't know how many days we're into it, but we did have like this. We had a couple of those. So I don't know how they kind of factor that. I don't know if it needs to truly be 14 straight days of, right, a straight decline, because we did have a couple times where we had upticks. So once we've got that 14 days, then we can really do this. What the president, what the governor wants to do is he wants to open up manufacturing jobs, and he wants to open up construction jobs. So if you think about in New York State, hundreds of thousands of people have applied for unemployment, right? In the Syracuse area alone, there's something like 47,000 jobs. Sorry, there we go. 47,000 jobs that could open up on May 15th. Okay, right? All right, good. Now, is every single one of those people going to go back? No. We own well, you know what? One of my students that lived in the Syracuse area, when I was teaching at Siena, she lived in not Clinton, New York. Cato Meridian. And she worked in a factory where they made bottles. And what I mean by that is that they would get this little plastic thing, and then they would melt it so that it would hold the top, like the screw top of a bottle. Then they would put it into this thing and inject air into it, and it would, not grow it, but expand it in a mold to either the size of a 2 liter or a 1 liter or whatever. And that's what she did for her summer job, is she literally made thousands and thousands and thousands of bottles. So let's say at that plant, there's 500 people that work there. I don't know, whatever. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, on May 15th, 200 people can go to work. Okay, right? And then in a week, have you guys had any cases of people getting sick there? Nope, things are good. Nobody's sick. Okay, make it 300, right? And then they'll ramp it up. They're not going to let a factory open. Ooh, the snap worked that time. The factory is not going to open at full capacity right off the rip. But on May 15th, these jobs are going to start opening up. I think like with the construction jobs, those probably are going to, listen, I'm not making fun of them, but if you have a roofing business and you have 8 roofers, they're not standing right on top of each other working on the roof, right? They're going to be socially distanced. So I think like those types of jobs probably will be able to work almost like or open up at full capacity. But I think the manufacturing jobs, they're going to have to like ease that in and kind of ramp that up. So that's kind of phase 1. And what he was talking about, what Governor Cuomo was talking about is there are people protesting around the country. There are some people that are protesting in our state. And he was very clear on this. He said, I am not opening this state up because of emotion. I am opening this state up because somebody is going to convince me with facts. So, he was talking about that, and I've brought it up to you guys, and everybody is talking about do we let emotion drive our decisions when we balance public health and the economy? He is saying public health is way up here. Yes, the economy is important, but he is not going to let people emotionally upset about their bank accounts and their jobs convince him that we should lose more New Yorkers than we have to lose, because the virus is, the spread of the virus will grow. Now he's standing firm on that, and what I hope is that he continues to stand firm. I'm not saying that I agree with him. What I'm saying is that I want him, and I want to see politicians that say, I believe in this and I'm going to stick to it. I want to see people like that. There may come a time where he says, okay, I've weighed everything. Now it's time for us to now we do have to take the emotion into this a little bit, and we've got to let it help us make, some decisions. But, he reiterated today that facts are what is going to drive him, not emotions. So when it comes to this phase 2 of reopening, and this is like really starting to let businesses open up, he said that a couple things have to happen. Is that, first of all, hospitals have to be well under 70% capacity, meaning that if there was a flare up, there are places for people to go. And I don't know what capacity we're at right now. But I know that, like, when the Comfort left New York City, that boat, and now they've started to look at like other places that they had set up as overflow. I don't think that they're dismantling those places. But I don't know that they're keeping them as staffed as they had been. So we've got to make sure that the hospital capacity is under 70%, and that the transmission rate of the disease or the virus has dropped below 1.1%. And again, he didn't mention where we were now, but he said that for that phase 2 reopening, that's where we need to be. And what he made very clear today was that he can't and he's not going to open up New York State. He's not going to do it. He's not going to say, okay, New York, there you go for it, release the hounds. And he's not going to turn the faucet, or the dimmer, and slowly open up the whole state. I think there's going to be 3 sets of rules. I think there's going to be rules for New York City. There's going to be rules for like Albany, Schenectady, Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo. Densely populated areas. Then there's going to be a set of rules for everybody else. Where I live, out in Schoharie, Duanesburg, Ithaca, the Adirondacks, right? We'll open up things regionally. And maybe I'm wrong, but I kind of think that, like, New York City is your most densely populated place. New York City, Long Island, Westchester, Dutchess County. There's one group of people. Then you've got those medium-sized cities in Albany, Utica, Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, right across the old Erie Canal. These places are going to open at a different rate. And then, again, everybody else. And again, maybe I'm wrong. That's how I do it. I think that's the smart way to do it. One of the things he said in phase 2 that we can't do is we can have, and it's very interesting, and I knew exactly what he meant when he said it. We cannot allow regional attractive nuisances. And I went, beaches. He's talking about beaches. He's talking about restaurants. He's talking about casinos, right? We can't open River Casino when Massachusetts is going to leave their casinos closed. Because what's going to happen is people in Massachusetts are going to say, whoa, we could go take a trip over to Schenectady and we can go gamble there. We can play slots there. Boom, 2-hour drive. We're in route and drive over. No, we don't want people doing that. So if when the casinos open up in Massachusetts and in I don't there are casinos in Connecticut. I don't know if they're no. Oh my God! Of course there are casinos in New Jersey. There's Atlantic City. So those are the states that we're kind of coordinating with. That's what he means. We can't open the beaches in Long Island if the beaches in Connecticut and New Jersey are closed. So we have to avoid that. In phase 2, we have to avoid that. We can't open usually, and this is the thing that's really bumming me out, people, is campgrounds. So right now, it looks like campgrounds will not, state campgrounds will not open this summer, and they still don't know about private campgrounds. I guess private campgrounds are under the uh, uh, understanding that they possibly can open. However, people cannot leave their campsite. So good luck with that, right? When you go to a campsite, a private campsite, well, they have a pool or they have, there was a campsite that we always used to go to where they had a big barn and they would show a movie on the side of the barn on Friday and Saturday nights. And, there was a video game room and, the volleyball court, and there were places for people to hang out. So that's one of the attractions of campgrounds. So it's not just sitting around and having a fire and s'mores and stuff. So we'll see. We'll even see what's going on with private campgrounds. But here's the other thing that he's saying is that we need to have the ability to test every 30 out of 1,000 people. So to do this real phase 2 opening, 30 out of every 1,000 people need to be tested to make sure that this is not spreading. Holy shnikes, right? Whoa, that's a lot of people. Hold on. Let me see. Let me see if I can do this math. I can't do it in my head. Let me get the old calculator. Whoops. So if we have 19 million, oh, crap. 19 million people. So that means we need, oh boy. Oh, that's going to be a lot. That means we need to test. Oh, that's a lot. That 500 and, is that right? 570,000 more people need to be tested. Wow. And this whole other thing that they're talking about, they need to, for phase 2 to really happen, he wants to have what's called a tracing system into effect. So what is that, Mr. Martin? What the heck does that mean, tracing? Well, what it means is this, is they're going to basically create this computer program. And I guess that the former mayor, Bloomberg, Michael Bloomberg, is the one. He's a philanthropist. He's a billionaire. He's going to be the one that's working on this with the state. Is that, let's say that your uncle gets COVID. Well, that's okay because he's a healthy guy and he's going to survive. But what they need to be able to do is create a database. So when your uncle gets it and he's at the hospital or he's at the doctor, they're going to say, where have you been in the last week? Well, I went to the store, I went to CVS, I went to get my oil changed, I went to this, I went to that, I went to ba 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 ba. Okay, who did you see? Well, I saw this person and I saw that person and I saw this person and I hugged that person and I shook hands with this person. Okay. Then, now that they have all this in the database, they get to kind of look at other people that got COVID, other people who had been, holy cow, 19 people that went into this this Jiffy Lube or whatever have COVID. Shut it down, right? So that's what they want to have in place is the ability to trace all of this. But what he's saying is, where'd my phone go? Here's my phone again. Let me do some more quick math. Well, that's simple. Hold on. 19 million New Yorkers divided by, okay, times. So that means we need to have about 6,000 people that are what he calls tracers. We need to hire that many people to manage the system. So that's a lot of jobs, but my friends, I don't think people are going to do those jobs for free. So we are going to have to pay those people to become these tracers. So, a lot of tests, 570,000 people he wants to test in phase 2, and he wants to get all these people on board to manage looking at, all this data about where people are, where they're getting sick. I think it's a good idea. I think it's going to cost a lot of money. The other thing is he says that, we know, and I thought this was pretty interesting. Bill Gates, the father of Microsoft, the founder of Microsoft, the father of modern computing, for all intents and purposes, has come out and said teleeducation isn't working, right? We know it's not working. So the governor today said, well, you know what? This is something we got to fix. If this is something that we may have to go to from time to time, we need to get people trained. And guess what, Governor? I wholeheartedly agree, because I really feel like, number one, I think it was a great thing for us to invest in Chromebooks. I think it's a good thing for people to be using, some kind of technology. However, I don't think that we really know how to use them and how to optimize them. We don't know all the bells and whistles, and I think that we need to do better. Like if I were to make a suggestion to Mr. Chandler about next year, I think that we can do it like on the morning news or something. We should have, like, here's your Chromebook tip for the day. Well, not on the morning. Well, maybe on the morning news, but have here's what you can do for your Chromebook. Hey, did you know you do this on the Chromebook? One of my fellow teachers today told me, well, you can't use Zoom on the Chromebook. Well, it turns out you can use Zoom on the Chromebook, but you actually have to install the app. You can't just go to the website. So, all those little things and all this technology, if we're going to from time to time have to fall back on it, well, we need to work on that. And that's what the governor's saying. And the other thing that he wants to do is he wants to put a lot of money into telemedicine, right? So what does that mean? Well, it means that, hey, I'm at home, I'm not feeling well. I can FaceTime with a physician, or I can FaceTime with a nurse or some kind of medical professional, and they can help me. They can say, okay, listen, we think you're okay. We're not so sure that right now is the time that you should come into the doctor. We'll check in with you in a couple hours. So, that's what he also wants to put a lot in this phase 2. So I guess let's put this all together. Mr. Martin, what the hell are you talking about here? Well, what I'm talking about is that phase 1 is going to happen. It looks like May 15th. It looks like the ball is going to get rolling. But my friends, what I just explained to you for phase 2, I don't think is something that we can pull together in 2 weeks. I could be wrong. I think it's going to take some time for us to ramp up phase 2. It sounds to me like that's something that could take months. I hope it doesn't. I hope that it's something that we can kind of get the ball rolling here sooner. But I'm not so sure. I think it's going to be longer. So other than that, my friends, the only other big thing in the news today that I saw, again, it was kind of hot hitting the presses here a little bit before we went live, is that I guess Vice President Pence, who is actually the head of the White House Corona Task Force, went to the Mayo Clinic today, and he chose to avoid the advice of people going into that clinic, and he refused to put on a mask. He refused to don a mask. So I don't know if that was an oversight on his part or if he was simply. I'm assuming he's trying to make a statement by not wearing the mask. And I'm not 100% sure what that statement is. Maybe the statement is all these rules are BS. I don't need to wear a mask. We don't need to wear masks. People shouldn't be worried. But I'm not too sure. You know, I said to my son the other day, he was like, do I really have to bring this mask? And I said, you know, we were going for a hike. And I said, well, if you wanted to stop at Stewart's and get a coffee, if you needed to stop at Stewart's and get, or use the bathroom or whatever, when you go into that place, you are going to have a mask on. And I would much rather that you think you look silly and you wear that mask and you go in and use the bathroom than, I'm looking at you in an ICU room. So that's the way that I look at it. It's like, at this point in time, why wouldn't you wear one? But that's me. That's me. We'll see. I hope that the vice president is safe. I hope that, he doesn't get sick. Oh, excuse me. Oh, excuse me, from that visit. All right, let's do our this day in history, my friends. So, this day in history, 1847, George Vasson, I think that's how you say his name, George Vasson was the first African American accepted into the New York State Bar Association. So, the first African American lawyer in our state. On this date in 1916, I don't know if you guys are big car geeks, but the Lamborghini car company was born on this day in 1916. On this day in 1919, so I guess World War I had ended, but we have this new technology in World War I that's being used in warfare, right? The plane, and the first. And I don't know if you guys know this, the Army, a lot of people think that the Air Force came out of the Navy, but it didn't. The Air Force actually was originally a part of the Army. And the first Army soldier to successfully parachute out of a plane, and I guess you could almost say the American Airborne, was born on this day in 1919. On this day in 1935, so the Great Depression is raging, the federal government stopped funding for the state of Illinois for federal aid during the Depression. Not only was the federal government kicking in money, but the states had to, I believe it was 25%. So if the state needed, let's say, $12 million, right, in aid to help feed people and to help give welfare to people, then the state had to come up with, if it was 12 million total, right, 25% of that would be 3 million. Well, the state of Illinois couldn't come up with it, so the federal government said, sorry, we're not giving you any money. And on this day in 1935, 1.2 million people from Illinois, and I don't know what you call, it's not Illinoisan, I don't know. We're on the brink of starvation. 1.2 million people in Illinois. Now, why Illinois, Mr. Martin? What in God's name? Illinois? Aha, Chicago, right? Remember that Chicago is in Illinois. That's where all those people come from. On this day in 1967, so you guys might know the boxer, the heavyweight boxer that said, "I float like a butterfly and I sting like a bee." Right? His God-given name was Cassius Clay, though he changed it to Muhammad Ali. Right? And on this day in 1967, Muhammad Ali refused to be inducted into the army. So the Vietnam War was going on and his draft number had been called. He reported to the induction center. However, when his name was called, he refused to step forward to be drafted. He claimed that he was a conscientious objector, which meant that he did not believe that war was the right way to settle your problems, and that he was a pacifist. Now, the thing that a lot of people said was, you're a boxer. Your job is to beat the living hell out of somebody else. And because he did not enter the military, his boxing title was stripped. His license to box was also taken away, and he will spend a lot of his fortune and a lot of money to have that a lot of his fortune and a lot of his assets to actually have his title reinstated and to have his name cleared. But a lot of people were like, fighters kind of hurt people. So how is it that you're a conscientious objector? And he was also fined $10,000. And then on this day, the only other thing I have on this day in history, in 2004, CBS 60 Minutes airs the first images and breaks the story about the Abu Ghraib prison. I guess you could kind of call it scandal in Iraq, where army soldiers that were prison guards in that prison were using some pretty demeaning tactics to try to break the Muslim men that were prisoners there, and they would strip them naked and walk them around, put dog collars on them and walk them around, and really we're doing things that we don't necessarily want to say, hey, our soldiers are doing those things, and a lot of them were ordered to do it. But that scandal breaks on the news on this day in 2004, so a little over 2 years after the invasion of Iraq. So, but that's all I have for you guys today. We are moving in the right direction, and we're doing great on our book. I talked to you guys last night about moving ahead in the book and me reading and kind of helping us move along. And here's what I thought about doing is I don't normally read on Saturday night, but what I thought I would do is this. At some point on Saturday, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record an hour of me reading. Then I'll throw that up so that when you guys have either time Saturday night or Sunday during the day, whatever, you guys can listen to that and then be ready for Sunday night. That way, that'll move us through the book a little bit quicker. And then, we'll definitely have time to get a third book in, because I really would like to read some fiction with you guys. And I talked to you about that book, I Am Number 4. So I'd like to read that with you. And again, we'll read the third book, and we'll continue to do the news every night as well. So, but that's all I have for you today, my friends. What a beautiful day it was out. Got a nice big long walk in today, and had the windows. I just shut the windows before I went live. I thought about leaving them open, and then I said, yeah, let me shut it, and just kind of lock in whatever heat. But I think tomorrow, oh, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, my friends. I'm yawning so much tonight. And it's weird. I was saying to myself, by dinner time, I had consumed an entire pot of coffee. Whoa! Look at this, guys. 60, 60, 65, 61, 67. I like it. Looks like it's going to be a little rainy here, maybe. But overall, it looks like things are really warming up. That's great. It looks like the next week we're climbing well into the 60s. So tomorrow get out and get a walk in if you can. Get exercise, get moving, sit down on the porch and read. And I'll catch up with you guys tomorrow night. Same bat time, same bat channel. Run the marathon. Don't run the sprint. We will get there. I have no doubt things are headed in the right direction. And, before you know it, we'll see each other. And before you know it, I'm going to have to shave this beard off. I think I'm going to keep the beard until we're officially done with this. But I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it's time to shave it off. But I'm definitely going to need to get I might have to do just the old haircut. Maybe that's what I'll do one night. Maybe I'll read, and then I'll get the clippers, and I'll give myself a haircut live. That would be cool. That would be really cool. Anyway, have a great night, guys. Thanks for joining in. I miss you. Run the marathon. Don't run the sprint. Be good. Be healthy.